Welcome to a very special edition of The Watchman. I'm Eric Stakelbeck. Money. American money. Your hard-earned taxpayer dollars being used to fund terrorists. It may sound hard to believe, but it's very true, and it's been going on for years under both Republican and Democrat administrations. I recently spent time talking to investigative journalist and best-selling author Edwin Black about where some of your taxpayer money is going when it heads to the Palestinian territories. Hint, it's not just going to feed needy orphans. The ugly truth is outlined in Black's groundbreaking new book, Financing the Flames: How Tax-Exempt and Public Money Fuel a Culture of Confrontation and Terror in Israel. To sum it up, if you're a Palestinian and you commit an act of terror against an Israeli, you're set for life financially. Here's Edwin Black to tell you how this works in his own words.
As soon as a terrorist commits an act of terrorism against an innocent civilian in Israel, whether that's cutting the throat of a child or stabbing a man standing at a bus or blowing up a building, as soon as that man does that, he goes on a special salary from the Palestinian Authority under Palestinian law, a law known as the law of the prisoner. And he gets a graduated salary depending on how heinous the crime is. If he kills 5 people and gets 5 years, he gets 1 salary. If he kills double that number and gets double the sentence, he gets double the salary. And so this actually incentivizes the misery, mayhem, and that the terrorists commit. Now, this money constitutes some of the best salaries in the Palestinian Authority. So you can literally go from poverty to wealth in the Palestinian Authority by committing an act of terrorism. This amounts to about 6% of the Palestinian budget. This money is paid on a priority basis. You can make as much as $3,000 or $4,000 a month while in prison just for committing this act of terrorism. And where is this money coming from? It's coming from foreign donors, tax assistance, United States taxpayers. We are fungibly financing terrorism in the Middle East, and apparently there's nothing we can do to stop it, even though it's against the law. The irony here is most of the Western media in Israel know this is happening. Nearly all the leadership in Israel, foreign and domestic, know it's happening. The only people who don't know it's happening are the members of Congress who have voted this financial assistance in to the Palestinian Authority and their constituents. In other words, there's a law against any of our money benefiting terrorism, but in point of fact, approximately 6% of all the money we fund to the Palestinian Authority is proudly diverted by them to pay terrorist salaries. And there's an entire ministry called the Palestinian Ministry of Prisoners that actually oversees the distribution of this money, and there is its counterpart in the civilian sector known as the Prisoners Club. Now, in Financing the Flames, we spoke to the ministry, we spoke to the Prisoners Club, we spoke to security officials, and we actually witnessed a period of time when someone was actually killed by an act of terrorism in Israel. I was on the ground, I had the Kevlar helmet, I had the bulletproof vest, I was in the homes of the Palestinian protesters, I was speaking to the Israeli military, the Israeli Knesset, and I saw the pain and agony. And so what I'm saying is, peace doesn't have a chance because peace doesn't pay. Because anytime they want some income, all they've got to do is commit an act of terrorism. And more than that, the prisoners are assured that at some point they will never serve their sentence, that there will be a prisoner swap, and that prisoner swap will ensure that they get out of prison after just 5 or 10 years. And for them, it's well worth it. The money comes, it goes right to the prisoner The prisoner signs a POA, a power of attorney. He transmits that money to his bank account, to his lawyer, to his girlfriend, to his family, to his mother, to his organization. And this is a system that we have in place. Our State Department knows it. Our administration knows it. The only one who does not know it is the American public, the men they elect. And I think that's something we should address. It's not just any prisoner who will get this money. It must be a prisoner who has committed an act against the Israeli occupation. It is a prisoner of resistance. That includes any bomber, any murderer, any mass murderer, and these are the heroes of the Palestinian Authority. What's most astonishing is this is not being done sub rosa. It's not being done in the shadows. This is an advertised program. This is a program that the Palestinians are proud of, and whenever foreign entities try to moderate their money so it doesn't fungibly finance these salaries, the Palestinians have a term for that, and that term is donor filth. Actually, idiomatically, it probably has another translation. And they feel that if they have a limited amount of funds from financial crisis to financial crisis, they would rather starve than see their prisoners, who are their heroes, go without remuneration for the acts of violence that they have committed against innocent civilians, homes, buses, trains. It's an astonishment, and I think it's time for America to wake up.
Unbelievable. And if you don't have smoke coming out of your ears by now, you will when we come back.
The New Israel Fund is working to destabilize the Israel Defense Forces and also to erase the Jewish identity from the State of Israel.
More to come on this special edition of The Watchman. Welcome back to this special edition of The Watchman. We've showed you how your taxpayer dollars are helping to fund comfortable lifestyles for Palestinian terrorists. Well, some so-called humanitarian organizations are also getting in on the act. The New York Times bestselling author Edwin Black sat down with me recently to talk about his new book, exposing the money trail that funds the campaign to erase the Jewish state. Take a look.
While the taxpayers are directly, fungibly funding terrorism, on another plane, we have the New Israel Fund, which is a Jewish organization which is actually financing the flames of confrontation. And according to leading members of the Knesset, including the deputy speaker of the Knesset, that's the Israeli legislature, and this gentleman's name is Yoni Chetbun, and many others that we spoke to who agreed with him, the New Israel Fund is working to destabilize the Israel Defense Forces and also to erase the Jewish identity from the State of Israel. This is an American Jewish organization that does a lot of good in Israel. They fund about 800 different organizations, hundreds of NGOs in Israel, and hundreds of millions of dollars over recent years. I think $250 million in recent years, the last time I looked. And they do laudable work like raising the status of disadvantaged families, working against discrimination, battered women. But dozens, scores of these NGOs are actually engaged knowingly in a campaign against Israel that fuels confrontation and makes it impossible for Arab and Israeli to reconcile and live in and coexist in peace together. I'm going to give you two examples. There are, of course, many in the book, and there are hundreds more of incidents that I could relate. But there's one organization called bestselling. I've met and worked and talked with bestselling, and they're very devoted people. And one of their jobs is to distribute handheld cameras throughout the Middle East, throughout the West Bank. And these handheld cameras go into the hotbeds of Arab confrontation. Now, in some towns, such as one that I visited called Nabi Saleh, there is an orchestrated, scheduled protest riot every Friday right after prayers. In other words, it's not a spontaneous riot. It is an orchestrated riot, and this orchestrated riot has the families in this small town. It's a small town of about 550 people.
Palestinian town.
All Palestinians, all of whom are related by marriage or by family to each other. It's one family, and this family marches each Friday to close the road, the main road that links it to Jerusalem. The military has to step out and stop the march.
The Israeli military.
The Israeli military and the Israeli soldiers who stand there passively are taunted. They are harassed. They are insulted. Their mothers are harassed. The kids are subjected to a child endangerment regimen where the kids are pushed right up against the guns, M16s. The kids are trained to, and I can give you some pictures of this, to drape flags over the masks. Exactly what you see on your screen is what is done. That's child endangerment. It's using children as human shields. And these cameras surround the Israeli soldiers. They're bought and paid for by the New Israel Fund, distributed through bestselling, and that is destabilizing the IDF.
You're watching a special edition of The Watchman with Eric Stakelbeck.
What the bestselling cameras do is they make it possible they facilitate the violence because people are playing for the cameras.
Yes.
And once those videos are made, they go up to the internet. They are edited in a way where the incitement is not shown, the taunting is not shown, and the reaction
of the Israeli soldiers.
The taunting of the soldiers is not shown. And when a soldier should finally react, that they capture and use as the basis for stigmatizing Israel, delegitimizing, prosecuting soldiers, accusing them of war crimes. And in general, none of this would happen if it weren't for the fact that there is this system which has been enabled in the name of human rights that surrounds a soldier within inches of his face with cameras. You couldn't do this in Midtown Manhattan. No. You couldn't do this in downtown Washington. You couldn't do this in the Loop in Chicago to a traffic cop. You can see from these pictures that we're showing on the screen now that I was there, that I had on the flak jacket. I was there in the middle of a riot. And what I observed is that when there were no cameras, there was no riot. And when the cameras showed up, the riot occurred. And what's interesting here is that the Arabs speak Arabic. The Palestinians speak Arabic. Yeah. They're in a tiny town. The Israelis are speaking Hebrew. Yeah. But the entire event is in English. Why is it in English? Because they're hoping it can be viewed by legislators, prosecutors, and I don't think this would happen if there weren't all these human rights and NGOs as part of the mix, reminding you that bestselling does some good work. Bestselling is, when there is an infraction, bestselling works with the government to identify the infraction. But no one wants to see children endangered. Yeah. And no one wants to see children used as human shields and children pushed into M16s by their parents proudly, and then somehow this becomes an industry.
The goal? To get on a major TV network. Coming up, George Soros. Need I say more? You'll want to stick around for this. Don't move.
You're watching a special edition of The Watchman with Eric Stakelbeck.
Welcome back to this special edition of The Watchman. George Soros, you know the name. What role does he play in all of this?
Soros is funding many of these organizations. In fact, what's interesting is the same organizations such as Bestselling and another one called Adala that tries to get Israel prosecuted in foreign jurisdictions, not only do they get Jewish money and New Israel Fund money, for some reason they also get money from funds in banks controlled by Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq. And I have to ask myself, what is it that they see in these organizations that makes it appealing for them to support them, as well as the New Israel Fund? Now, to answer the question about Soros, when one of the chief protesters who organizes this protest, when the protest goes violent, this individual is hired by a Soros-funded NGO to record the incident. She gets paid $85 per incident. No incident, no money. Violence and incident, she writes it down, $85. That's approximately 3 to 4 times the average daily wage in the Palestinian Authority. I confronted the Soros people. They said, we do not approve of child endangerment. But when I also confronted the New Israel Fund people about this, I found a group really of the brightest and best minds in the American Jewish community and the Israeli community who are dedicated to their vision. And their vision is an Israel that is not Jewish, and their vision is an Israel that does not have a right to be in any lands that are outside certain borders. And their vision is they are right, and everyone who disagrees with them is not right. And they were completely cooperative with me. They were completely transparent to me because they're very proud of what they do. Yeah. But what they do is currently, according to members of Knesset and the military, including one which represented 300 officers called Consensus, they are, quote, destabilizing the IDF in terms of prosecution, in terms of harassment, in terms of stigmatizing them, and they're attempting to not only delegitimize Israel, these critics say they're attempting to erase the Jewish identity from Israel, so there will be no Israel. The first thing we can do is expect our media, mainstream and alternative, to report on the facts that they all know exist, so that more sunshine is spread on this topic. I can't do it alone. I need the rest of the media to do their end too. They all know this exists. They're doing nothing. Second, people need to ask, before I write a check out to an organization, I'm a donor, I'm a philanthropist, I'm a wealthy individual, I'm giving $18. Where is my money going? That's just standard. And if you believe your money is going to a charitable organization, is all of it being used for charitable purposes? Are you funding soup kitchens, or are you funding social upheaval? And last of all, we expect our legislators to craft tax policy that will help achieve the goals and values of the United States, so that the money we spend to pump funds into Israel helps reconciliation and peaceful coexistence between Palestinians and Israelis, and does not fund confrontation, does not fund terrorism, and does not do the opposite of what we intend. In many ways, our inability to execute so many of our programs in this country also fall on the very, very difficult climate in Israel. And what happens? Our money ends up financing the flames.
And there you have it. Thanks to best-selling author Edwin Black for joining us. And remember, pick up his new book, Financing the Flames: How Tax-Exempt and Public Money Fuel a Culture of Confrontation and Terror in Israel. I'm Eric Stakelbeck, and you've been watching a special edition of The Watchman. For more, log on to cbnnews.com, and until next week, remember, never hold your peace.